Welcome to another of my podcast and blog post, themysticp.com. It's another perspective with I, the mystic philosopher. And yes, my melanin people, it's high time for reasoning. The title of this podcast and blog post is Black is Evil and White is Good. It is also a part of my series of presentations that I've been doing called Redemption from the Curse of the Black Spell. And my objectives are to show and rationally prove through the use of my intelligence, logic, and reasoning, coupled with my activated common sense, that in this reality, or for those of you who might prefer hearing me say, that on this side of reality, black is evil and white is good. Now, this podcast and blog post material was originally written and published as an open letter by I, the mystic philosopher, in the year 2014. And it was directly addressed to 8 people. 8 people that I honestly thought back then, and at that time, were relevant to our cause. 8 people that I thought were prominent and strategically well positioned by the system and in the system, and could therefore use their positions of influence to disperse useful information while provoking thoughts in the various sectors of the African American, African Canadian communities and the African Caribbean diaspora. These were people that I honestly thought that if they too were to become awakened and become enlightened to the fact that in this dimension, in this system's culture and society, black is evil and white is good, that they could and that they would then use their individual office, fame, stature, their access to the system's multimedia platforms, and reach their individual audience, thereby initiating and advancing a very serious intellectual discussion and informed reasoning with the genuine intent of finding real and practical solutions to the subjects, the issues and crises of race, racial discrimination, racism, racial profiling, poverty, injustice, inequality, and above all, police profiling, police brutality, and police unwarranted killings of our highly enriched melanin people of African ancestry. And by initiating the discussion in search for real and tangible solutions for the aforementioned problems that have been and that continue to inflict evil and unnatural pain and sufferings on our people, our African people, then other open-minded truth seekers and independent thinkers from among us might have also be encouraged to join in investigating what I, the mystic philosopher, in my search and research, have discovered and perceived to be a direct and an indirect deadly relationship that these crises, these man-made plagues, the plagues of race, racial discrimination, racism, racial profiling, poverty, injustice, inequality, and above all, police profiling, police brutality, and police unwarranted killings of our highly enriched melanin people of African ancestry have with the word black and the word white, and the systems, concepts, and ideologies of black and white, of what is black and what is white, the systems, concepts, and the systems, ideologies of who is black and who is white. Now here are the names of the 8 people to whom my open letter blog post was directly addressed. Number 1, Maria de la Soledad Teresa O'Brien, American broadcast journalist, executive producer, philanthropist, and back then in 2014 she was the host of CNN's multi-parts documentaries called Black in America. Number 2 is Don Lemon, also an American journalist and a CNN's news anchor. Number 3, Alan Bucker Jones, now a former community radio host, a radio show host of the now defunct local community radio station in Ontario called CHRY 105.5 FM. Number 4, Muta Baruka, a famous Jamaican Rastafari and dub poet and host of the Stepping Razor and the Cutting Edge on Jamaica's reggae radio station called IRA FM. Number 5, Lincoln and Tony Blades, an internet blogger and the founder and producer of an online magazine called This Is Your Conscience. Number 6, Cornell Ronald West, an American philosopher, political activist, social critique, an author of a famous book called Race Matters. He's also regarded as a public intellectual and prominent member of the Democratic Socialist of America. Number 7, Sankofa Inchifa. Again, back in 2014, he was a very well-known, self-described and self-proclaimed controversial community radio show host and the host of now defunct the Kubanwa, a Pan-African culture show that was aired on the former CHRY 105.5 FM radio. And number 8 is Fitzroy Gordon, president and CEO of G98 FM radio based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. He's also the host of a talk radio show called The Grapevine. My blog post was, and now this podcast is also being generally addressed to all honest and free-thinking people the world over who may come across it and who may wish to comment, respond to some of or to all of the questions, or may just simply wish to share his or her perspectives on the topics and subjects that are herein discussed. So I'd like to begin by saying and admitting to you all, my listeners, and fellow natural native earthly humans, my sisters and brothers, that in my unyielding attempts for several years at trying to expose what I, the mystic philosopher, have discovered to be two of the biggest lies that the peoples of our Mother Earth have ever been told and are being deceived by, and also my desperate attempts at sharing and highlighting two basic indisputable facts that I have on several occasions been abruptly dismissed and rudely ridiculed while experiencing hostility and insults, primarily from some of my own race, or primarily from some people of my own race and African ancestry. Some of these people are considered by many to be the most outstanding, the most honorable and respected, very socially interactive, educated and highly esteemed individuals in our dual black versus white society. Some of the people from whom I have encountered resistance and harsh criticisms are called, named and labeled as white people, while regrettably my toughest resistance and harshest criticisms are generally from some people of my own race that rightly or wrongly are called, named, labeled black people, and others that answer and call themselves black community activists, black community leaders, black revolutionaries, black freedom fighters, black politicians, black intellectuals, black educators, black social workers, black entertainers, black writers, and black community talk show hosts. From my perspective, the two biggest lies that I also call the great big white lie and the great big black lie, coupled with the two basic but indisputable facts, have in the past contributed to and are currently contributing to and are responsible for the downfall, the abuses, and the continued denigration, subjugation, exploitation, and above all, the slaughtering and the extermination of our people, of my people, the world over. This is so not only by the hands of the system's police force and agents of force, but very regrettably, it is also by and at our own hands. Here is the first big lie, which I call the great big black lie. Or more correctly, the great big black lie, the great big deception, the great big con that has ever been told about black and blackness. For centuries, and quite possible for millennia, we have been told, convinced of, and deceived by our conquerors, our oppressors, by our adversaries, by the system, by the system's multimedia, and by our own so-called leaders, be they religious, political, and otherwise, so-called leaders, into thinking, believing, and accepting as being factual, undeniable truth that we, the natural native earthly humans, we the Earth's organic people that are also visibly identified or identifiable by our highly enriched melanin, highly carbon skin complexion, are black. And that we are indeed a black people. That we are the black race of people, the black race of humans on the earth. And thus, we have been falsely, deceptively, denigratingly, and contemptuously named, called, and referred to and treated as blacks, and as the black race of people. The second big lie, which I call the great big white lie, or more correctly, the great big lie, the great big deception, the great big con that has ever been told about white and whiteness, is this: we have been told, convinced, and deceived by our oppressors, our adversaries, the system's multimedia, and by our own so-called leaders into thinking, believing, and accepting as factual and as undeniable truth that they are white. They meaning our oppressors, our adversaries, the system's multimedia, and our own so-called leaders are indeed white. And that they are indeed a white people. The white people, also called the white race of people, the white race of humans on the earth. And thus they are erroneously, falsely, deceptively, and intentionally named, called, and referred to as, and treated as white, and as a white race of people. We have also been taught, told, and some of us are even convinced and deceived into thinking, believing, and accepting as factual and as undeniable truth that we are being governed, controlled, oppressed, exploited, and ravaged by white people. We have also been taught, told, and some of us are even convinced and deceived into thinking, believing, and accepting as factual and as undeniable truth that we are being governed, controlled, oppressed, dominated, exploited, and ravaged by a white system, a white oppressive system, which is conclusively called the white supremacy system, and a system of white supremacy. To say it another way, we have been taught, told, and most of us are even convinced and deceived into thinking, believing, and accepting as factual and as undeniable truth that the malevolent and diabolic system of oppression and injustice that we are being governed, controlled, oppressed, dominated, exploited, and ravaged by is a white system, a white oppressive system, which is conclusively called the white supremacy system and the system of white supremacy. We have also been taught, told, and most of us are even convinced and deceived into thinking, believing, and accepting as factual and as undeniable truth that the founders, the leaders, the legislators, dictators, presidents, governors, prime ministers, bankers, preachers, religious leaders, and so forth, you name them, etc., etc., of the malevolent and diabolic system of oppression and injustice are white. That it is a white male-dominated system and that it is a white man's world. But as I intend to show and prove, and as you shall no doubt shortly see or hear, that there are no such thing as white people, white humans, white human beings, or white humankind that are known to be visible and dwelling on this our planet and Mother Earth. And since there are no white people, and since the people, the human beings and the humankind, etc., that call, label, and name themselves white and are currently being called white are not at all white. In fact, and you too shall shortly hear and see, that they are not in the least white. Then the idea of white system, the idea of a white system, a white power structure, the idea of a white power system of control, a white domination system, otherwise called white supremacy, is not only erroneous, nonsensical, and false, but it is also a fabricated fraud. It is the devil's tool, the devil's weapon, the devil's philosophy that for centuries, if not for millennia, the devils have effectively used to deceive to divide and to conquer us, the natural native peoples of the earth. The idea that Caucasian people are white is totally false, totally untrue, totally erroneous, totally misleading. It's a lie, a great big lie.